It's now time to introduce a very special final guest, Miss Bonnie Greer. In addition to her extensive repertoire as author, playwright, Bonnie has spoken on the importance of women in STEM, on Black Britain, and on creating inclusive environments. In fact, Kingston University, where she is Chancellor, has very recently been named the Higher Education Institution of the Year in the prestigious Leon Awards.
They deserve it. They deserve it.
And these awards recognize the commitment to widening access to higher education. Now, I really am so excited to introduce Bonnie Greer. A little while ago in the Diversity Committee, we discussed our wish list for speakers for this conference, and guess whose name came right at the top? Personally, I have long adored Bonnie Greer, knowing her only from TV appearances, from newspaper columns, and in these, she's always stood out from other opinion leaders by her fierce intelligence and clarity and wit.
It's like my funeral. You never get to hear these kind of things.
And given how busy she must be, we actually were doubtful she would be available. So we dared to hope we could attract her to our meeting today. And so I'm really happy she has agreed to contribute to our theme of inclusion today. So it's my pleasure now to hand over to Bonnie Greer.
Very kind, very kind, very kind. Thank you very much. And I suppose, I've been watching the conference on live stream, and it has been brilliant, really. And congratulations to all of you and to the thinking that's been going on. And I also want to give a shout out to Royal Society trolls. I kind of thought they'd be a little bit more interesting than they are, but they're just like any other trolls, you know. It's like I like my trolls, actually, and I call them my trolls, because I'm a playwright, and you can't make up some of the stuff, people. You can't make it up. So I borrow from trolls. I borrow their spelling, their thinking. So guys, and unfortunately it usually is guys, or people who pretend to be, keep on trolling, because I'm going to say some stuff you will really need to troll about. So welcome. Welcome. I guess Lena asked me to come here because this is not my field of expertise, although I have to say I didn't realize how much STEM meant to me until about 5, 6, maybe 7 years ago. I was looking at Simon Singh's fabulous film on the Riemann hypothesis, and I was working on a play. And I looked up at it, and I saw Sir Andrew Wiley's blackboard. And I looked at that blackboard, and forgive me for saying this, but I'm going to be very spontaneous about it. I looked at this blackboard, and I burst into tears. I just cried and cried and cried. And, you know, there's a part of me was going, what in the hell are you crying about? And the other part was, I have no idea what he's doing, but I know what he's doing. I know what and when he sits there at the desk, and that moment where he says, I was looking for my solution, and, you know, he's got this desk with piles of junk, and he goes, the thing that was preventing me from solving the equation was the answer, and his eyes well up. And I thought, it took me right back to when I was a little kid. I grew up in Chicago, South Side, oldest of 7. My dad, my fabulous dad, he was here during World War II. He wound up luckily being a assembly line worker, steel worker, for 40 years. We were very lucky. The union took care of us. We were union people, union kids. And he did his best. I mean, he sent us to Catholic school, which for poor black kids growing up was the grammar schools of the community. Took us out of the rough state schools. But I was educated by nuns. In those days, I'm Hillary's generation, you didn't talk about being a scientist or a mathematician if you were a girl. Forget about it. So I'm sitting up here going, I love triangles. I was trying to understand the isosceles right triangle. I was looking at patterns, and Sister So-and-so said, actually, you should learn to type. So I didn't, and some of you women out here know what I'm saying. So I didn't learn the triangle, and I didn't learn how to type either. So that's why my notes look like this, because my computer broke down. But you know, you never lose anything. And so when I looked at that film, I thought of that little girl, 7 years old, who loved triangles, loved patterns, loved all that, loved what if. And then I thought of all the kids out here who may be flipping hamburgers, who might be polishing cars, who might be told, you don't speak English, so you're not coming here, who might be Einstein. Not that I was, but who knows? We don't know. We don't know. And we gotta know. We have to, because our civilization depends on it. We gotta find them. So what I'm gonna do now is give you my random mad thoughts. And they're not gonna be in any particular order. And like I said, as I was watching the conference, I actually had to write stuff over, so I might not even be able to read what I wrote. But just to say, this is the most wonderful chair and dais, because most people think I'm 6 feet tall. So when I find, you know, you can always tell when I meet people, there's this mega second where they're looking at me like, so this is wonderful for me, this big chair. I picked up phrases this morning from the wonderful panel I heard this morning, phrases like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We've got equal marriage laws, what else do you want? And austerity and diversity, we just can't afford it. So I wanted to throw that out there. I've opened a play. This is not a advertisement, but anyway, it kind of is. And it takes the outlines of Chekhov, because I am a what-if person. I like what if, what if, what if. So I put this African-American family inside of the cherry orchard shape. It's not the cherry orchard because I don't speak or read Russian, so it can't be, but it was the shape. And it's got okay reviews, pretty good reviews, but I got 3 scathing ad hominem personal attacks from the big 3 legacy papers, which if you are a playwright, that's really bad news for them to do that. And it was personal, it was deeply personal. And I was so shocked because they didn't review the play. And then I realized something that I should have known a long time ago, that I've transgressed. I'm somewhere I shouldn't be. I got no business there. I got no business with Chekhov. Who am I? Who am I to talk about Chekhov? So this friend of mine who's a big director wrote this, and I wanted to share this letter with you. He said to those critics, they couldn't look at what you'd actually done. They kept having to show how much they loved Chekhov, and they weren't really sure whether a black free female from Chicago had the right to take it on and put black people in it. It's not as simple as misogyny or racism. It's thus just that they don't think you should be there. That's all. And they may look naive if they like what you've done. That's a lot of stuff to hold and to take on. And I know, as a black woman, I have steeled myself for that all of my life. It's so built into you, you don't even know it's happening. Now, let me do the next thing I was thinking while I was running over here. The worst board I've ever been on, and the board I had to leave, was headed by a woman. And this woman, I'm in my 60s, I will be 68 in 2 weeks. And we're all gonna be 68. If you haven't got to 68, it's the best. 68 was my favorite year. And this lady was 1 year older than me. Hillary's 1 year older than me, so I know this arc. I know what they've gone through. This woman treated every woman on that board so badly that the men on the board, and I'm talking about these are some heavy, hard dudes, Goldman Sachs, the city, I mean hard cases, would sit back there like this. You shouldn't treat, he just chopped us. And then I realized after I had to tell her off, which I refused to do in public because the sisterhood thing, there were younger women on the board who actually needed to hear me do that. I realized that this woman had come up through the city in an era where you never showed you had children, you didn't admit you were married, you didn't wear makeup, you had to be hard, you had to be cruel, and you had to be mean, not only to everybody around you, but especially to the women, so you kicked the women. So my point, and the stuff I want to throw out here today in my little provocations, is that I don't like the word diversity. Although I use it, I respect it, and I understand it because this is a way of communication. But I think what we've done now is that we've created, and I'm saying this as a visual and a kind of visual, that in saying the word diversity, we have legitimatized its opposite, because you have to ask, what is it diverse from? And I think what it's diverse from doesn't exist. It may even be harmful to us now to assume that this other thing exists. And I think it doesn't exist except in our cultural minds. I think we've created it for a lot of reasons. One of them has to do with power. Maybe everything has to do with power. I was always, like I said, the little kid who said, what if? That's how I write my plays, that's how I live. So, let's do what if. What if you put 5 children and say they can kind of do the same things? Let's say they're good at maths. I mean, that's still a category, but they can do maths. But maybe they're different ethnicities, different income levels, backgrounds, different genders, language, and you give them a puzzle to solve. What would happen? What would happen is what interests me is not the solving of the puzzle, but the strategies they use to solve the puzzle. These different strategies are the benefits of diversity. Strategies. Diversity, therefore, expands human capacity. That is its purpose. And that, to me, is common sense. I used to be deputy chair of the British Museum, and being the what-if person, very curious, I used to sort of like toddle around the different departments with these huge minds and ask them questions. And I once asked about Neanderthals, who the British Museum loves Neanderthals. They get a bad rap, especially Neanderthal women. And there were another species that evolved alongside us, and I asked this one anthropologist, what happened? And she said, well, she thinks that our species, those of us who became who we are, we traveled and we prospered because we migrated, we moved around. And it's like when you go on holiday, you learn because you encounter other people. You have strategies. So us Homo sapiens sapiens, we had to make different strategies to survive. We got smarter, and that's diversity. We migrated, we encountered people, we learned. So back to my point that the thing we are diverse, or when you use the word diverse from, does not exist except in our collective cultural minds. And that has to do with power. If we continue to use the term diversity, we empower that other state. And I think, as I said, I think it is not a real state. It's interesting to me, I like etymology as well, so it's interesting to me that diversity came into, In our language, our English language, diversity before the 18th century was a negative term. It meant perverse. The 18th century, it became a positive term, and I was interested as to why it became positive. It became positive as a result of the French Revolution, and it was one of the components of democracy. So in order to have a democracy, you have to have a diverse polity. And that means the coming together of different skills to create this polity. And so therefore, diversity and democracy are, to my mind, the same thing. They're exactly the same thing. And diversity creates democracy itself. And so what is the opposite, therefore, in the political sense of this French Revolution sense of diversity? It is autocracy. Autocracy is what we are diverse from. Autocracy contains women, men, all colors. It's about the coming together and consolidation of power by the few, for the few, on behalf of the few. Diversity breaks it up. So instead of us looking at groups of people, men, this, classes, we need to look at power and talk about it more in that term. And we do, I do my own version of Einstein's mind experiments, you know. What if you got a 69-year-old mother of one and a grandmother of two, and she was elected to the most powerful office on earth. And not only that, she became commander-in-chief of the most powerful military the world has ever known. She was in control, or is in control, of the nuclear codes. She can deploy. She will be heard by everyone on this earth, whether you like this person or not, because this person happens to be the President of the United States. So what happens then? What happens is that the landscape begins to change, begins to shift, because we are creatures who look. We need to see, and what we see, we can be. And so what happens in a diverse environment is not making rules or law. You change the equation, and you change it based on your culture. The equation becomes changed, the environment becomes changed, and we humans do what is natural to us. We react and we change. And so the battle becomes the autocracy's attempt to hold the definitions. So we mustn't ourselves hold definition. We must transgress ourselves and do it all the time, all the time, all the time. I say, and I've said this at board, places like IBM, and I mean it, I mean it. We need millennials at top tables. I don't care if they're not educated, I don't care. We need the brain. We need the way they see the world, because they're in the world now. We need to listen to them. We need to hear everything they say. That's diversity. We need them because they change our environment. They shake up our environment. Why do we need people of color in a, say, all-white environment? Because they make us better, because we're interacting. We're changing. Men, women, gender, ability. It expands our human capacity. So I would say all the great work that was done today, challenge yourselves a little further. Take your rules away, your categories away, your definitions away, your stats away, your parameters away, your goals away, and come out into an open space and see what happens. See what happens, so that we don't become stultified in our own definitions of ourselves, because it can happen. It can happen. And then we don't become of use. Then we don't become modern. Then we become the things that we're trying to run away from. We just have different names, different skin colors, different genders. That's all. But we become the same. And we should be rebels all the time against the status quo. That's all I got to say. So anybody want to ask me anything or?
Please raise your hand if you have any questions. We have some roaming mics. And there's joining us. There's one right here in the middle.
Hi, my name's Edith. I haven't got a question, but I'd just like to say, Bonnie, I saw your play on Saturday, and it was really good.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm glad you were there, thank you. Thank you.
Behind.
Hi, so you are 68, I'm 62.
Bravo, we're the same generation.
I'm a pensioner, and
Yes.
what has been wondering of late is that what do you see as our roles in the future, given our newfound longevity? I expect to live to more than 100. I'm that healthy.
That's a very good question. We baby boomers are gonna be the longest lived generation so far. We've outlived all the programs that were designed for us. We've outlived we've outlived everything. The National Health Service, they say if you were born the year I was born, you're the luckiest person in the world. 1948, because you're all the way through, you're taken care of by the state. We've outlived all of that. We've outlived it. And we're still out there. I think some of us should think about stepping aside. And what I mean by that is this. Not that we should come out of the flow, but I think there are a lot of us in our generation who are determining too many things. I don't think it's good. I think technology has changed the world enormously. People ask me to talk about Black Lives Matter, and I have plenty of things to say about it, but it's not my generation. I came up through the Black Panthers and all of that. That's a different story. And so I think we need to find out how we can assist. You know, if our coming from the 60s, we call it wisdom, but if our wisdom is of any use, let us give it. And we need to listen more. We need to listen a lot more, especially to millennials, because they are in a very different reality than we've experienced. They're very, very intelligent, but in a very different way. So that's what I would say. That's what I do. I listen to them a lot. If they ask me to do something, if I can be of assistance, I do. But I really think we are a very unusual, long-lived, healthy generation, but at the same time, we need to step back a little bit and let's see if we can be of assistance to the future. That's what I'd like to do.
There's one right here. And the other hand's let me know.
I love the idea of bringing more people into the boardroom from the millennial generation. How do you do it and get the people who are going to speak out when they arrive?
Well, obviously, Apple wouldn't have me, IBM wouldn't have me running anything if they were smart. I don't think there is any way to do it except that you have to have a board and you have to have a culture within the company that is open to that suggestion. Now, it may never happen. It can't ever happen, but that board and that CEO should be open to something as transgressive and disruptive as that we could get a 25-year-old to sit at this board table and make some plans with us. And that to me is one test of whether an organization is actually coherent for the 21st century. Could you do that? Would you do that? And if they say no, They're not ready for the 21st century, and I'm going to be really upfront about that. We are becoming a trans-border, international, multilingual universe, world, and everything has to be prepared for that because that is what's happening. And I'm not even talking about the baby boom we just had in the year 2000. We don't know who these people are. So we have to make all of our institutions and our society fit for purpose for them.
Other questions? Rita? Okay.
Thanks. So for me, personally, a what-if question has sort of arrived after Brexit, because here we are busily trying to tear down barriers for differences that we can think of,
Yes.
including
Yes.
where you're born.
Yes.
And suddenly we are told, well, most people want you to create barriers which didn't exist before. How are we to deal with this? Is it a what-if question?
You know, I'm a big Remainer, and I'm still a Remainer. And my husband's a big Remainer, and he's a lawyer, and he's an Englishman. And I say this because he's utterly convinced it's not going to happen. And he explains it to me in very English terms, but he says it's not going to happen. But one thing that we can do, our generation as legacy, is to talk about what Europe was like. Because I have friends who just pop over to Berlin and they hang out, and I can tell them the Berlin I grew up in had a wall. I couldn't imagine popping over to Berlin, okay? I couldn't imagine popping over to Cuba because I'm an American citizen. I couldn't go to Cuba. So it's these kinds of things that we can bring to the table to remind young people in particular that the world they live in was hard fought, hard won, and that we must hold on to this world, even in the face of people who are very frightened about what they think is coming, because this multicultural, international, non-wall world is the reality that this generation lives in. They live online. This is their world. They don't know any other world, and we have to be able to somehow navigate the knowledge that we have so that they can begin to actually validate what they know is to be true, is true. That's, I think, what we can give and what we can be staunch about as long as we have breath and as long as we're active and we can do things. We can be staunch about those things that we remember from our youth, where our youth was about walls. It was about barriers. It was about nations fighting each other. Our parents in our parents' lifetime were in war. We know all of this stuff. We know it, and we should hold on to. We know about racism. We know. I mean, I'm just at the end of segregation, but I desegregated school when I was a very little child, and I remember that bus, and I remember the way it looked. And so I can tell my friends, you guys can be hollering about this, but you have never confronted what, you know. So these are the things that we can impart, and I think these are things we should impart as we help them navigate and be in the world that there is, because they don't know diversity. They don't know it. They know the world that they are in. And we put names and numbers and labels on it, but they don't know it. So I really am passionate about really thinking about these generations and how we prepare the world for them, for the world that they know.
Other questions? Yep, just here.
So me again. So I'm going to sort of like push back against what you said, because, you know, for a few years now, people have been telling me do charity. And somehow that sort of like sticks in my craw. I don't want to do charity. I want to do revolution.
Oh, I didn't say charity. Oh, no. This is revolution. It's not charity. Oh, no, 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 my brother. I hear what you're saying, and I respect that. Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you said it, Because if I imparted that, that's definitely not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about being a volunteer or no. I'm talking about revolution that we can do, that we can do.
And there's one at the back on the right.
Hi, thanks very much for your talk. I really enjoyed that. I guess I'm really interested in what you mean by your objection to diversity. So the idea that diversity is diverse from something that doesn't exist. Because my concern is that there is something that does exist, and just because there's a cultural conception of it that's mythified, that doesn't mean that it doesn't materially exist. And I think if we want to talk about power, statistics do show that power lies somewhere pretty one-dimensional in terms of when you look at protected characteristics.
I'm losing your voice a little bit.
Sorry, am I speaking to the microphone?
Yeah, you were going down a little bit.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, did you get that?
Yes, I think I heard that you said that there is something that exists. And of course, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. Of course it does. But I think sometimes, well, in my experience, we spend a lot of time fighting it and talking about it, when in fact, my experience again, if you burrow down into it, you see human beings, and you see a much more complex picture than the sort of monolith that sometimes we are, I should say, I wouldn't say led to believe, but that sometimes the language makes us believe. It isn't a monolith. It's very complicated. And I've learned that in my life. I've made a lot of mistakes because I thought I was dealing with the monolith and I found out I wasn't. So that's my opinion, and that's what I'm imparting. I would rather talk about reality, which is the complexity of human beings and if you want to use the term diversity, within ourselves, as opposed to looking at a thing that we are against or we're trying to break down. Because I think that thing is much, as I say, much more complex than, it's full of human beings and human stuff. And I would rather focus on diversity in the sense that, the technical parts of it, get people into businesses, get them into schools, make sure women and people of color, and to say, make sure that is all happening, yes. But underneath it, know that we're talking about a human condition that is actually the real one as opposed to the one we're trying to fight. And that's what I mean. So it's operating on two channels, and develop the next step, I think, which is the world in which this diversity exists. It does exist. It does exist. We're all in a room. We're in a room that is incredibly diverse, and we live these kind of lives as well. So I think we do get sometimes caught up in policy wonk language and terms that become an end in themselves, and they don't open the door to the next place that we have to go to. So I was attempting to throw a spanner in all that, shake it up a bit, and see what comes out as a result, and not to make anything definitive, but just to throw your curveballs, they say. Chicago Cubs are in the World Series, and throw you a curveball and see what happens if you catch it. That's it, basically.
I have another question there.
I think I've picked up some clues from what you said so far, Bonnie, but how do you convince members of the autocracy that democracy is the way forward?
Well, I don't spend a lot of time doing that, so, and I know that a lot of you have to do that. One of the things I picked up on this morning that was said by someone I can't remember, I thought was really good, is that diversity works. It's actually good for business. It's actually good for schools. It's good. It actually has results. It works. So as much as we can demonstrate that in the terms that they can understand, I think that's a tiny step to begin to make. And maybe maybe some of the indices, maybe some of the categories are necessary for that. But that is a narrow end in a sense. And I guess what I'm saying is I would like not let us be caught up in that as the end game, as the thing, when actually what we are doing is creating a society that already exists. An inclusive society exists. We are now defining it or bringing it into the light or whatever, but the thing exists. All of you live that life. I live that life. My family is that way. So while we are making the definitions to speak to power, we mustn't forget that the thing that we don't think exists actually does. It does exist.
There's room for one more question if anybody has one. No? Then I'd like you all to join me in thanking again Bonnie.
Thank you for listening too. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie Greer. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for I heard the whole conference, and it was, it not only was powerful, but what was good for me, because I'm not in this particular area, I learned a lot of the, only word I can use is jargon, the things that you have to know to be able to talk and to show to this who you have to affect. And what I guess, and thank you for saying that, I guess what I'm trying to say is, please don't think that's what it is. Don't think that you have to get caught up in it, that you have to explain it, that you have to translate it, that you have to sell it, because that's soul-sapping and mind-numbing and isn't really what you're doing. So that is what I'm saying, even though I learned an enormous amount today about all these different things. But thank you.
I want to say that really your message has been incredibly positive in this sense and empowering, even though you did throw us a curveball. As you said, you did challenge us with reconfiguring the way that we talk about diversity.
I'm a synesthete. I don't know if any of you know I know a lot of you know what synesthesia is, but see, what I see is a organism like this, which is the conference, and I came in like the little neutrino, and I went, and just to see what would happen. Are you going to move? Are you going to do? Are you going to shape? And it isn't about being right or wrong or good or bad. It's let's see what configuration we can make in order to advance what we're trying to do, our work. Because the other side gets the language very quickly. It molds it, shapes it, and it uses it against us. And so we have to be very fast.
Let's put another round of applause. Please stay. So we have come to the end of the 4th annual diversity conference here at the Royal Society, and it highlights some of the key themes that we have identified by our diversity committee members and by the diversity team. And our focus this year, as you know, was on creating an inclusive environment, and the reason is so simple. While diversity is an essential tenet of modern society, and Bonnie Greer has emphasized that in the strongest terms, it is the inclusive environment which encourages it to thrive. So today we've had expert insight into some of the markers of an inclusive environment. So the Athena Swan, the Race Equality Charter marks, the Stonewall Workplace Equality Index, ANAI Awards, and National Diversity Awards. They've all developed markers for success in this area. We've examined it from an industry perspective with Network Rail's inclusive leadership training, and in an academic environment with the University of York Chemistry Department, who were awarded the first Athena Swan Gold. Now, I have had the pleasure of working with the diversity committee members and the diversity team, many of whom are here today, and we had a variety of projects over a very productive year. I will just reiterate some highlights for you. So there is our Parent Carer Scientist project on all of your tables, and it celebrates a diversity of work-life patterns of 150 scientists across the UK, with the aim of increasing the visibility of people combining a career in science with a family life. And it has been distributed to all universities, secondary schools, and colleges in the UK. And the associated social media campaign, #AndAScientist, reached 3.5 million users in the first months after launch. Very proud we hosted an event called Out in STEM for LGBT History Month in February of this year to discuss what are the needs of our lesbian, gay, bisexual and trans scientists, and we have committed to running an annual event. So you heard about the briefing and animation that I developed on unconscious bias, and it's really been viewed widely, and the Royal Society makes it absolutely open for use by anybody who finds it useful. But one particularly wonderful thing is that we are currently piloting a mentoring scheme for Black Year 13 STEM students. And the representatives are actually here in this room. And they've already told me it is going paces. I look forward to hearing more of the report. And here I really would like to thank Lena Cumberbatch, Sarah Dodd, Leslie Miles, and others that were helping in the organization today. They've all really been the spirit, the leading spirit, the masterminds behind the conference. So thank you very, very much for doing this. I'd also like to thank the wonderful sign language interpreters who I've just, watched with great pleasure and delight. And I really admired, I'm afraid I don't know your name in the back, the wonderful lady who has been able to give us text to read while people were speaking. I thought it was absolutely marvelous. So thank you very, very much for that. So for me, certainly, it's been an exciting time, and really, I'd like to thank you all for being with us here today. Thank you all to the panelists, the speakers, and the fun workshop interactions, to all the people who took part in that. Now we have a drinks reception in the next room, and you're all cordially invited. And finally, I hope you will join us again next year, November the 16th, 2017.